Flanspade here, and I'd like to offer you a brief summary of what happened in our Understanding Conflict workshop. As there are a lot of slides with detailed scripts on them, it's not possible to read all of them in this summary. So I suggest if you wish to take notes or to read the slides in detail that you would push pause on the video. Before the summary, I would just like to say thank you to everybody who came to our workshop. It was a wonderful experience working with you, and I really appreciate the comments that you gave in relation to the evaluation afterwards. For anybody watching this that hasn't been there, quite a lot of the work was done through the interaction with people in the room. So I hope that the slides will give you some idea of the kind of topics we discussed in relation to understanding conflict. The purpose of the workshop was to describe the nature of conflict, explain the different terms and concepts used, and try and relate these theories and insights to conflicts that people had experienced themselves. We had suggested ground rules in relation to how we would work together as a group, and one of the things that was important in relation to this was that in terms of managing conflict in groups in general, if rules regarding group behaviour are agreed at the start before any conflict has occurred, it increases the opportunity to deal with conflict objectively, and people can feel safer. But it's also vital when you're working with children or vulnerable people that ground rules are appropriate to the group, as for example, confidentiality may not always be possible. We did an exercise in relation to conflict in recognizing how many rectangles people saw. This led us on to defining conflict, and conflict occurs when two or more parties believe that what each wants is incompatible with what the others want. We saw there were 5 main causes: interests, understanding, values, style, and a conflict of opinion. We noted that conflict builds with unsatisfied needs as a result of incompatible needs and wants, limited consumable resources, or differences in ideas or opinions. We used the childhood example of one sweet remaining and both children wanting it right through the workshop because it helped us to look at the various theories and aspects in relation to conflict resolution. Mayer was one of the major theorists in relation to conflict, and he said that conflict can be viewed as occurring along 3 different dimensions: the cognitive, the emotional, and the behavioral. We've seen that conflict is not simple. It can occur because of any one or any combination of the 5 causes that we saw, and also any one or any combination of the 3 dimensions in which the conflict can take place. So it does not proceed along one simple linear path. People were asked to do an exercise in relation to conflicts they have been involved in themselves and to identify these dimensions of the conflict. In terms of the causes of conflict as well, there are 3 important elements in any conflict: the people, the problems, and the process. Very often it's really important on the process as to how the conflict is resolved, because that can dictate how satisfied people are with the outcomes. We saw that conflict can escalate from discomforts right through to a crisis point, but the key to successful conflict resolution or prevention is to address it as early as possible in the cycle. It's usually assumed that conflict is a negative force, and what's often ignored is that it can be a source of change and can result in positive outcomes. Constructive conflict occurs when a disagreement is not seen as a situation where one person wins and the other loses, but instead where there's a common goal and a team spirit. In positive conflict, better ideas are produced, people search for new approaches, long-standing problems are surfaced. People are forced to clarify their points of view. The tension of conflict stimulates interest and activity, and also people have a chance to test their capacities. Whereas in negative conflict, some people may feel defeated, demeaned, and the distance between people can be increased. You can have a climate of mistrust or suspicion. Turbulence may cause group members to leave, and resistance may develop where teamwork is needed. Conflict resolution is an approach based on mutual problem solving between the opposing parties. It's really the purpose of building bridges between them. But what's important here is that both parties have to agree to become involved in the process. The steps involved are developing an awareness, diagnosing the nature, causes, and consequences, and then applying the appropriate methods. There are 5 skills involved: spot the conflict, understand it, act at the right time, look for a win-win situation, and finally check the results to see that the conflict has been fully solved. The methodology really is designed to diffuse the negative emotional energy involved in the conflict and to enable the disputing parties to understand and resolve their differences. Again, here we looked at an individual exercise where people suggested how they normally respond to conflict. And we found that how we handle conflict as adults often reflects how it was handled in our home. Also, it may reflect the society or the cultural response which would be common in our lives. The Conflict Resolution Network identified 3 conflict behaviors, which they said were fight, flight, or flow. These are aggressive, passive, and assertive behavior. Fight refers to aggressive behavior where a person expresses their feelings, needs, and ideas at the expense of others, standing up for their own rights but ignoring the rights of others. Using aggressive behavior to try and dominate others is hostile and self-defeating, and it can result in anger, self-righteousness, and possibly guilt later. The payoff is that it vents anger and can achieve goals in the short term. The problem is it alienates others and creates feelings of frustration, bitterness, and isolation. Passive behavior is the flip side of that, and it includes not expressing your own feelings, needs, or ideas. It ignores your own rights and allows others to infringe upon them. The payoff is it avoids unpleasant situations. The problem is that the needs are not met and anger builds up and feelings of low self-worth can arise. Assertive behavior means that a person expresses their feelings, needs, and ideas, standing up for their legitimate rights in ways that do not violate the others. The payoff is it mostly achieves mutual goals. The problem is it can distance those who feel discomfort in open communication within relationships, or those who have difficulty expressing their needs, or those who wish to dominate. We then looked at the situation of positions, interests, and needs. Positions are what we say we want, interests are what we really want, and needs are what we must have. In a win-win strategy, it allows both or all parties involved in a conflict to negotiate a mutually acceptable solution. However, arguing over positions is inefficient and it endangers the ongoing relationship. In Fisher's win-win strategy, there are 2 fundamental tenets. The first is to separate people from the problem, and the second is to focus on interests, not positions. In separating people from the problem, you need to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Don't deduce the intention of others from your own fear. Don't blame them for your problem, and discuss each other's perceptions. Regarding emotions, recognize and understand emotions, yours and the others. Make them explicit and acknowledge them as legitimate. Allow the other side to let off steam and don't react to emotional outbursts. Regarding communication, you need to listen actively and acknowledge what's been said. Speak to be understood and not to win. Speak about yourself, not the other person. Arguing over positions produces unwise agreements as it ignores the underlying interests and needs of the parties involved. Successful resolution generally reconcile interests, not positions. In the win-win process, you need to see the problem from the other point of view in terms of the needs and concerns of the other party. Identify the key issues and concerns involved, not the positions. Determine what results would make a fully acceptable solution, and then try to identify new options to achieve these results. Dealing with conflict assertively means working together. It means separating the person from the problem. Be clear and specific about perceptions and desired outcomes. It's important to look forward and not backwards. Look at and listen to each other. Ensure you understand each other. Brainstorm creative ways of resolving the conflict. Choose a mutually convenient time and place, and acknowledge and appreciate one another. There are also common sense problem solving techniques. There's more than one way to solve a problem. Different situations require different approaches. Working together is better than falling out. There's a difference between how and what we decide. How can be much more important than what. And again, it's important to focus on interests, not positions. Good communication is important in conflict, and this stems from your intentions, not from your technique. How we communicate. We only use 7% communication through words, 38% through paralinguistics, and 55% through facial expression. Some of the communication guidelines in relation to conflict. Listening is really important, and sometimes you have to listen for what's not being said, as well as obviously listening to what the other person is saying to you. In speaking, it's important to show that you're listening and you understand, and set the other party at ease. It's also important to clearly express your interests and demonstrate your willingness to various options. There are some communication blockers which can sometimes hinder conflict resolution. Giving reassuring or untimely advice, a dismissive response, an inciting kind of a response, avoiding the topic, topping up or changing the subject.